Have you ever felt unheard or invalidated by your family, leaving you emotionally drained and confused? Do you often find yourself walking on eggshells around certain family members to avoid conflict or criticism? And are past family traumas impacting your current mental health and relationships? How can you set boundaries with toxic family members without feeling guilty or selfish? What steps can you take to heal from the emotional scars left by a dysfunctional family environment? Join me after the intro for a conversation with a very special friend with whom we will answer this and many more questions. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's start. Hi, I'm Rossana D, and this is Forgive and Thrive, a podcast where we explore what thriving in life means and how we can achieve it, irrespective of our past, current condition, and expectations that those around us or society in general may have. Let's go. Welcome to the Forgive and Thrive show. Family relationships can be a source of great joy and often are considered a cornerstone of support and unconditional love. However, for many, family relationships can be a source of profound emotional pain and psychological distress. Dysfunctional family dynamics, marked by behaviors such as constant criticism, manipulation, and emotional neglect, can leave lasting scars that affect our mental health and overall well-being. And if not tackled, can stretch to and affect all aspects of our lives. Recognizing these harmful patterns and understanding their root causes are crucial for anyone seeking to break free from the cycle of dysfunction. So today we delve into the complexities of dysfunctional family dynamics and their impact on mental health. Learn to recognize the subtle and sometimes overt signs of emotional abuse and neglect, and discover effective strategies to cope and heal. And we dive into this fascinating topic in a conversation with our guest, April Goff Brown. April is a certified quantum human design specialist, certified Oracle card reader, intuitive life coach, and an author. She came to human design after a long career in the youth development and human services field. Her first multiple award winning book, I Hug You in My Heart, was published in 2021. It's a heartwarming story that came from a memory of her granddaughter asking, Nana, when I'm not here, do you forget about me? So beautiful. April's new book, Journey to Yourself, unlocks the gates of human design to awaken our inner wisdom. Hi, April. Welcome to the Forgive and Try show. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Rosanna, I'm really, really happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I really love this topic because I think, as we were saying just before starting, I think everybody has that one or two member in their family that are a little bit tricky to deal with, right? So I think it's a topic that many can resonate with and will be beneficial for so many people. But before we go into that, I would love to start with you. And in particular, what was your journey into dysfunctional relationships within family and where everything basically started for you?
That's a really good question, and go back to where things started or not. One thing I want to preface with saying is that every single family has dysfunction. We grew up thinking that that's normal. So a lot of when I look back now and see where the dysfunction was, I didn't know any better. It was just normal. It was normal to have a sibling that just was like this all the time, you know? It was normal where parents favored one over the other and they had favorites. It was normal to have yelling and loud voices and commotion and chaos. But I also grew up in a family of 7 kids, so that probably was normal to have some chaos and loud and everything else. But it was in stepping away from some things and then trying to figure out, well, why is it like this? Because when we start to feel, the pain comes through. The difficulties for me and my family were with one sister. We all knew this is oil and water and they don't mix. And then it led into issues with my mom, who favored her over me. And for so long wondered and was hurt because I didn't have that close mother-daughter relationship that I idealized. That's the key, that I idealized. But I did come to understand really only recently, so it's been a long journey, that I received the mother that I needed. It may not have been the mother that I wanted, because there were other women who came into my life who filled certain pieces of that and actually gave me such a broader understanding of life, I guess, and how to be and how to act and so on. And so it was a long journey of filled with a lot of anger, of course, masking hurt, not understanding why sometimes, and then just writing people off, just like pushing them away, until I finally, and I think it was through the journey of both oracle cards and human design, of really coming to get quiet and become introspective and begin to look at different perspective. And that's when the healing began.
That's so important. So, what would you say were the specific behaviors that you found really, really challenging to deal with, and that they really affected you emotionally and perhaps in your development?
I think it would be when something would come at me seemingly out of nowhere, that I would be just doing what I do. And it could have been I was reading, it could even be as an adult that I was conducting my life. And all of a sudden, something would be said or accusations would be leveled. And it's like, well, where did that come from? And then more people would jump in, and certainly social media helped that along at times too, where, wait a minute, this was uncalled for. It was seen at an event once by a couple of my siblings where I was sitting at a table chatting with them, and this sister came over and and it was a tone of voice. It may not have been what was said, but it was the tone of voice that they actually looked up and said, well, where did that come from? It was just so out of line. So that was part of it, is that my makeup is such is that I tend to be quiet. I'll tend to be in my own world. I'll tend to, if something needs to be done, I'll do it, but then I'll go off and do my own thing. And so that was part of that. Then there was part of being the oldest of seven, that I felt like there were a lot of, which I thought was normal. I don't think it's normal now, but there was a lot of responsibility placed on me. And so growing up with this burden of responsibility, I had to take care of this, I had to do this, I was asked to do this. And because I did it, it was expected that I always would, until I hit those teenage years. And it was, oh, no, 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 no. Now I'm finding out that there's a whole new life out there. And so there was a lot of struggles through some of that, and as I look back now, I can see that as I pulled away from family and doing everything, and I'll put everything in quotes because I probably didn't do everything. It felt like it, that it also created tensions with my mother. And I realize now that I pulled her support out from under her by growing up. And that's all I did, was grow up. What happened in the dynamics is that the sister that I had difficulties with stepped in. And so that created more dynamics throughout most of my adult life, our adult lives, where it was push, pull, in or out. And there were years that went by where none of us spoke because it was safer. It was easier to do it that way. Nothing got resolved. It just was like you put it on the shelf and say, I'm going to leave it there until it jumps off the shelf and says, well, hello, I'm back again. So it was those kinds of dynamics. I didn't have anything that was, I think, a big trauma event that unfortunately so many people suffer from. It was just a series of little things that kept building and building and building until one day I broke. And I went to my husband and I said, I'm divorcing my sister. And he looked at me and he said, you can't do that. And I said, well, yes, I can. If couples can divorce and children can divorce their parents, why can't I divorce my sister? And today we have a really good relationship because it was in the divorce for me was not giving away my emotional stuff to her, not getting caught up in it, learning how to let go, learning how to release and appreciate her from a distance to the point where once it all got released, there was this sense of peace inside. I'm not sure it was anything major. It was just a buildup. And it just goes and grows and grows until you realize this isn't normal. I've got to do something. I have got to make a change because it's eating away at me, and that doesn't feel good.
This is very important because it's true what you said that a lot of people have traumatic experiences growing up, and obviously the trauma makes everything more complex and difficult to overcome. But at the same time, everybody else can resonate with this kind of build-up situations. And I love what you said about essentially that difficulty of growing up where you need to decide, do I belong to this family and this group of people, and do I follow what they want me to do, or do I align with myself? And I think it's normal for children to go for the belonging first and foremost, and
Right.
it's only growing up that we decide, well, actually, I'm different and I need to express myself in a different way. And that's when perhaps tension can go out of control, because then you sound almost rebellious, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I heard, and I can't tell you how many years ago, probably 30 some odd years ago, was the serenity prayer. And that became my motto. And I think that that was the first step for healing because it was what can I control and what can't I control? And I realized that the only thing that I could manage, that I can control, was myself. And once I came to appreciate that and understand that, then I was able to begin to make whatever attitude changes or belief changes or physical changes. And I think that many of your listeners may find themselves in that very same thing is it is about what we can control. And that's where we make the change because we can't force anybody else to be or do anything different than what they always do. And I think that's where we get stuck, which I think then causes more dysfunction and more trauma to ourselves and is I think much more harmful for ourselves. So that was the first eye-opening thing is hearing the serenity prayer and saying, okay, this is what I can control. This is what I can't. And I have to know the difference and take action only where I'm in charge and I'm in charge of me.
April, based on your experience, what would you say is the impact or are the common impacts that we can find from dysfunctional family on us? I can think, for example, self-esteem, self-worth, also related to your story with that sister. Have you noticed other things that perhaps can point someone towards this behavior is dysfunctional? This behavior is not helping me.
There's something around, I think, that self-worth, that really believing that I'm worthy of something. And I think as you were asking, and I'm thinking back with some of the young people that I'd worked with and had staff work with over the years, is adults are not necessarily always equipped to be a good parent because of what their experiences were. And so we have to really understand that this becomes generational. Okay. And multi-generational at that. And if the patterns that are there don't get stopped, it's going to continue for a lot longer. And so there were these patterns that I saw happen. There was a sense of abandonment, especially when families aren't together. And that was the case in most of the young people we worked with, is that the parent relationship wasn't, there weren't the two parents, one is absent. And so there's this sense of abandonment. and it leads into some self-worth issues, is that, well, they don't love me enough to have stayed, or I'm not worthy of being loved because my mother doesn't love me, or my father doesn't love me. He doesn't pay attention to me, therefore I'm not worth having attention paid. So we end up interpreting things as children, but not necessarily accurately, because we don't know how to. And so we make up these stories in our minds, and we carry those through all our lives. And so if we don't correct the misinterpretations of that, then we're going to carry that into the kids that we raise and into the families that we have. And so you can see how it just continues and continues and continues. You hear how alcoholism runs in families, addiction runs in families, abuse runs in families, violence runs in families. It's because of these generational patterns that we've not broken free from. And so I think those are the big things. And so even if I were to look back at my own family, my father's father died when he was 3 in an automobile accident. My grandmother raised him, and at the time there were 3 others, so 4 young kids, an 8-year-old to an infant. But this was during the Great Depression in the United States, and she was tough. She was really demanding. And so he didn't know what that positive mother-dad relationship would be. On my mother's side, her parents were married for a long time, and both grandfathers drank. But also, my poor grandmother was pregnant from the time she was 21 till she was 42, almost every single year. So there were those kinds of expectations, and he had his life, he had her, but he had girlfriends on the side. So there was this acceptance in some ways of relationships outside of marriage, which, in past generations that may be. So there's all these things that have happened over generations. How did my parents bring those into their relationship? And did it work or not? And how did that impact all of us as we grew up and had our own families? And I can see differences in how we've chosen to raise kids, but it's also a different time. And so that's the other thing I think we need to be aware of, is that it's a different time now. There's so much more influence on parents and children than there ever was before, so that perhaps it might be easier to break some of those cycles.
I love the fact that you brought the generational cycle into the conversation, because I think that is extremely important. And that I can see affecting all sorts of relationships, and therefore affecting other areas of our life. It's not just the family or extended family, but his work and relationships and everything else in our life. Would you agree with that, or do you have any experience in that sense that you have seen?
No, I agree that these generational patterns that come down have the impact there. But I think as children grow and they start to do what comes natural in that adolescent period of exploring and differentiating themselves from the parent, there's a couple of different ways I think that journey can go. You can either really find a way to step out of it and examine it and look for and make commitments to doing things differently, or you may find that you continue to live and socialize in circles that are just like that. And for me, there was always some tension with my parents. My mother could be really sullen and very quiet, and my father would try to cajole her, and if it worked, fine, and if it didn't, but then it wasn't the kind of relationship that I saw with my best friend's family when I was a teenager. And I spent a lot of time there, and I watched them. And I also watched an uncle in particular, and saw what they brought to the relationship. And he was a blue collar factory worker and did snow removal in the winter. And she was a mom, and the two of them adored one another to the point that he referred to her always as his girlfriend, and that was her boyfriend. And they had pet names for one another, and you could feel the affection and see it. And I would go home and I didn't see that same level at home. And I said, well, that's what I want. that's what I'm going to have when I get older. And so I worked at it and watched for it and learned about how to be different, how to talk when things needed to be talked out, how to accept, how to compromise, um, how to learn how to be myself and allow my partner to be himself. And I was so darn fortunate to have found somebody that were each other's biggest cheerleaders. So I was able to take this observation and this desire to have something else and learn how to have it. And so can break a pattern. So it can be broken, but it takes something that opens our eyes and saying, and I want different, and I deserve different, and I'm worthy of having different, and then set about to making that difference because you've worked on yourself.
That is so beautiful. It reminds me of a story of two brothers. One was alcoholic and the other extremely successful. And they were asked why they were like that. And the one who was alcoholic said, because my father was alcoholic. And the other said, I'm so successful because my father was alcoholic. And it really tells the story, right?
It does.
It's up to you to decide which direction you want to go and you want your life to go. So thank you very much for stressing that, because I think it's important. When some dynamics happen, sometimes we feel powerless and we feel that there are no options and there are no way out of those situations. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of reflection, as you said, to find the way to overcome them.
I think people need to get out of victimhood. I mean, victimhood is very seductive. And that can create more mental health issues than anything else, I believe, because it's easy to blame somebody. I could still today blame my mom, my sisters, my father, I could do all of that, but there isn't any need to blame because it just was. And how do you work for that? I no longer wanted to be victimized by my anger. That's what it is. I was being victimized by my own anger. And it was, no, April, you don't want to do that anymore. You need to let it go. And hence that divorce that I mentioned. It was a turning point. And in this day and age, there are so many resources available to people at all ages that generations, nobody talked about it. I mean, that's the other thing about the generational patterns. Nobody talked about this. You suffered silently. This was your lot in life. Okay. We know better now. We know better now. So it's with these resources that are available, there's always somewhere where help can be so that you can get away from being the victim and begin to heal and to know what is actually a normal for you. And I think that is really, really important. It goes back to that sense of worth again, that when you begin to nurture yourself, you're really accepting your self-worth. And nobody can give you worth. You have to get it from deep inside yourself. And so that's the area to work on, to be able to move away. And this isn't going to be something like there are mental illness, and we know that mental illness, and I'm not talking about necessarily the diagnosable illnesses that exist, but there are mental health issues that we have that can be addressed by coming to nurture yourself and realize that I have to be important to me. I have to be okay for me. If I'm not okay for me, I can't be good for anybody else. And so working on yourself, while it is very selfish, is very necessary.
April, you mentioned that there are so many resources nowadays, and we definitely talk more about dysfunctional behaviors, dysfunctional patterns, and what is or could be considered normal family conflicts, for example. Can you give us some ideas on how we can differentiate between these two? What is sort of acceptable? And I appreciate that it's very personal, but are there ways where we can, for example, reflect on our situation and say, okay, to me, this doesn't feel okay, and this other behavior is okay. So how can we, I don't know, ask questions?
Yeah,
That's
And it's, I'm sure it's going to be different for so many people. I think first we need to accept that conflict is natural. Conflict is going to happen. It's in our DNA. And I think some of the things I'm going to say really I got from really in my study of human design and the gates. And as I was putting that last book together, conflict is normal. Friction is going to be there. There is going to be disruption and shock and chaos. That is going to happen in our lives. Okay. So we have to understand that life is not just filled with rose petals and fairies and love and happiness all the time. So there's coming to that. But I think when it crosses over where because of this, I'm made to feel less than. One thing that is name calling. I mean, it's so brutal what it does to people to be called names. But to me, that was destructive. Things when you know that someone is lying to you and making things up to be hurtful to you. Those are the kind of things where it crosses over that this is not okay. When people are breaking your confidence or telling stories that are out of turn, exaggerating things about you. These are things that are not okay, that center on, okay, I need to stop here and figure out, is this someone that I want to continue having a connection with? It's not okay when there's a physical altercation. It might start off with a slap on the arm, or a shove, but it can certainly escalate to more later on. When something makes you feel less than, and can bring a tear or two. I mean, because when we feel less than, the first thing that happens is it's either we cry or we get good and angry back. And if those emotions are coming up at you, then it's time to step back and say, this isn't right. This isn't right. My body is telling me this isn't right. The tension and the knots in the gut are telling me it's not right. The overwhelming emotion with tears and that is telling me this isn't right. So your body is going to tell you, and it's going to give you hints, and everybody's body is going to tell them a little bit differently. I hope that answers kind of what you were asking.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's exactly where I wanted to go. So thank you very much. And we will come back towards the end to the emotions, these strong emotions that we can create. For now, I want to go into, if you don't mind, strategies that we can use to, for example, setting boundaries with toxic family members. You mentioned that you had to divorce your sister for a little while. And that's not an easy decision to take. I know I had to divorce a friend. What are strategies really that we can use to set boundaries that make them respect us?
I wish I could say there was an easy way, because I'm not sure that it is easy. I think it requires some introspection. It requires reflection. I have found that journaling is a great tool because it allows you to capture the emotions of that and what may have stemmed it. It allows you to go back and see patterns that are going on, because one of the things too is that we need to examine, what am I doing also to cause some of this? Because I might be doing something and it may be subconscious. I may have realized that I would push my sister's buttons sometimes just to push them because it would get a rise out of her, and I got you. Well, if that's what I was doing, then I'm contributing to it just as much. And so how do I step out of that is setting a boundary. It's understanding what you want, what you value, what you'll accept. And I'm going to tell you, I know it's not easy. I've seen people who have deep love for somebody only to be abused by them. And I know you've seen it as well. And it's a wonderful example is that I don't know how to leave. I don't want to leave because I'm so caught up in the aura of this person. And yet it is detrimental. At some point, you need to decide that I don't deserve this. And so I've got to set some kind of a boundary in place. So you've got to do the work on yourself first and foremost. And it's not easy. I really wish I could say, if you do take step 1, 2, and 3, it's going to be easy and you have your boundaries in place. but it might start with some communication. And communication is really a big challenge for people because it's like, you did this, you did that, and it just escalates. What I think couples find out is you have the same fight over and over again. And I think that's just a general pattern. But learning to be open and ask that I have something I want to share with you. Is it okay to share now? Can at least open up the other person to say, well, sure. And or the person may say, well, no, I'm not ready right now. You have to appreciate that readiness as well. If you want to be able to set some boundaries in, they may not be ready. Well, I'd like to talk about it with you. So could you let me know when you think you might feel like we could have this conversation? And then develop some patience around that because they may not know how to come back at it. So it's learning how you can communicate about it and sometimes saying, I have to share this with you, but I don't want you to react. I just want you to hear me. And people don't always listen to hear, they listen to respond. And so, no, I don't want you to respond. I just need you to hear me. And then we can pick this up later, but I've got to talk about this right now. And that can be helpful too in trying to clear the air, because you may find out, the other person may find out, well, I had no clue. I really had no idea, and I'm really sorry about that. How can we make it better? How can we? And so even these things that I began to use, I found my husband uses them back on me. And so where we might have had in previous disagreements, and it's not that they were big, but they were disagreements, we now find that we can sit and have a conversation that is open and loving to hear the other person. We don't blame each other for things anymore. So that may be a way to help create boundaries. But, going to finding a coach, finding a therapist, I think is really important for them to help you understand how and safely how to establish your boundaries. Because you may not be able to do it on your own. You need professional help. And so I recognize that it's okay to seek that if that's what it takes.
I love the fact that you started with the introspection because I think the human reaction would be to go into communication the wrong way. You did this and I didn't like it. And that can perhaps contribute to perpetuating some dynamics that are really hurtful.
Right.
So I really love that you started, start journaling, start understanding things.
Right.
And also start understanding what is your role in that situation. Because sometimes we tend to play the blame game. And you did this rather than recognizing that in that dynamic, we have a role as well. So I think that is extremely important. So thank you very much for stressing that point out. But I also love the idea of communicating in the right way. And I think communication that for me includes the listening, the active listening, as you
Right.
mentioned, is extremely important. And I think it should be something taught at school.
And when we want to address it, we want to solve it right now. And you can't solve things when you're in the heat of emotion. You've got to be able to hear, you've got to step back. It may take coming back and stepping back until to the point where you can hear it in a way where you're open to it. And I know you know of many people who have gone through therapy and it doesn't work because one part of the person, if it's a couple, one part is closed down. They don't want to hear. They don't want to change. They don't want, and that's important to know too. If the person doesn't want to make the changes, then you have to make the changes right for you because you can't change another person. So we can't change our parents. We can't change our siblings. We can't change our partner. We can't change our children. We can only change ourselves. I think that's an important lesson for us to learn. And by changing ourselves, we may be able to accept things differently because our perspective gets changed. That is another important thing to understand, that it will take some time. It took some time to get there. Now it's going to take some time to leave there. And it doesn't have to be solved today because it won't be. It just isn't going to be.
You also mentioned that with that particular sister that you initially divorced from,
Right.
now you have a good relationship. How can we break the cycle of dysfunction and then create a healthier family environment?
What I learned is that I needed to step back and get some perspective and recognize that she wasn't doing it all. There were other things that came into play. That was important. So she may have said things to somebody else, but then they would make sure they called me to tell me what she said. And then it would keep the cycle going over and over again, so that it wasn't just the two of us. It was everybody else that was in there doing their little piece to things. I also gave myself permission to listen to some of the things that she had said to me over the years and realize that I had hurt her as well. I didn't mean to, but what she interpreted wasn't correct. But I could see how she could interpret that and realize that I also then, so I was seeing that I had some part to play. By taking the emotional hold that I let her have and let everybody else give me, because they would say, well, she said these things about you. And of course, it would upset me and make me angry. And then I would just be mad at her even more so. And so it snowballed like that. Once I stopped that game from going, that it was, I'm not interested. I don't care what she has to say. There's nothing she can say that can hurt me anymore. People stopped. I call it changing the dance step. So I changed the dance step to something else. And so it became a better dance, because then she wasn't getting the same thing back, because my guess is they were saying the same things back to her. And so the dynamic changed where we both could relax. And while we're never going to be best of friends at all, we have a cordial relationship. I care about her. I don't want anything bad to happen to her. And it's nice to be able to feel that kind of caring for her that I didn't have for most of my life. And it was by changing the dance step and not allowing game to continue to go on. It was harder with her and my mother's dynamic, because it ended up impacting, I felt it always impacted the relationship I had with my mother. I also seen that there's some right to that, but not 100% right to that. There were other things too. One of the healing things I did is when my mom turned 90, I wrote her a long letter, if you will. It was 90 memories. And some of them were wonderful, some of them were fun, some of them were painful, but they were all the memories of our relationship. And in doing that, and I did send it to her, but in doing that kind of exercise, really released a lot of things. It really let things go, that it wasn't all bad. There was some good. It wasn't all good. And I don't have to focus on just the stuff that made me angry or the stuff that she hurt me with. And I think it was instrumental, because within a couple of years, about a year before she passed on, she sent me a card and just asked me to forgive her. And I sat with that card for days, because I had no idea what to do with it, because I didn't know how to respond. I already had, but she realized that there were some things that she needed forgiveness for as well. So it's when you change the dance steps that other people, I think, get to look at things a little bit differently and see, well, gee, I'm not all bad either. So maybe they looked at me that, well, she's not all bad. She's got some good things about her too. So let's focus on the good things, because we're not caught up in the enmeshed relationships that families can bring.
You mentioned here a word that is extremely important for me and obviously for the podcast, which is forgiveness. Also, you mentioned these very strong emotions that we can create when toxic relationships occur. How can we release them? And in line with the name of the podcast, Forgive and Thrive, what do you think is the role of forgiveness or self-forgiveness to leave those emotions behind and break that cycle of dysfunction?
I think we first need to come to understand that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. It's not about, it's like forgive and forget. Well, you don't have to forget by any means, but forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, because it releases. And a lot of the learning that I've done over the last few years, and it's really about energy. And when we can enter into forgiveness and give ourselves that gift, we start to change the energy that is within us. And so that the peaceful energy, the energy of joy, the energy of love can come in, and you can first start to feel that for yourself. When we enter into a state of forgiveness, it's almost like we're doing ourselves a favor, because we're letting go of We're letting go of anger. We're letting go of hurt. We're letting go of victimhood. We're letting go of our own nastiness, if you will, and saying, I choose not to engage in that any longer. Once you've reached there, it's the decision is, do I keep this person in my life or do I let it go? We have to know that sometimes there are people that just have to be let go. It isn't good for our own mental health, our own sanity, our own wellness to maintain that relationship any longer. And so sometimes there has to be a break, like break it off and there is absolutely no contact. In other cases, it might be that it's broken off, but it's contact from a distance. As long as I keep them far away, I can have a phone call with somebody once every 3 months for about 10 minutes, made the contact, everything's fine, but I don't have to be part of the drama that I was getting sucked into before. Forgiveness really does mean stepping outside of, I think, ourselves and examining the situation for what it is and looking at the interpretation that we had versus could we shift that interpretation in something that's become much more empowering for ourselves? So forgiveness is really, I think, a very selfish, and I'll use self with a hyphen ISH, kind of an action to take because it is preserving the self first and foremost and allowing the time for that other person to be in your life may be gone. I do oracle cards, and there was a card once that I pulled, and the image sticks with me, and I think it's appropriate for right now. It's the colors on it are very brown and red, so they're hard. And it's a tree trunk, and underneath the tree trunk is this little girl sitting there with her hands around her knees and her head bent. And the card is called Root Girl. She is the injured part of you that lives inside of you, and she's there to protect you. At some point, we need to be able to let her know she's protected you so well for so long that it's time for her to rest because I am now okay enough to be able to move on because I've become stronger. I've become more open. I've set my boundaries in place. I know that this is what I want and do not want in my life, and to thank her for her service and let her rest now. That was when I first got that card and read it and reflected on it, that was such really important things that a lot of things that we're carrying with us in this trauma, in this mental health arena, were there initially to protect us. The story we made up was to protect us. And now it's time to learn how to let it go, become the strong adult that you are here to be, that you are meant to be, because we all have a lot of power. We have a lot of gifts. We have a lot of talent. We have a lot of love and compassion and joy to give to the world. And when we forgive, we're able to start to focus on those things because our energy is ready for it.
I absolutely love that. And in fact, I think that sometimes we keep people in our life because we feel perhaps the guilt or shame for letting them go and release them. While we can do that with love. Wish my former best friend all the best in her life. Just realized that she can be a good person for others, but she wasn't a good person in my life, and she was destructive for me and my well-being. So I had to take the decision to put a long distance between us.
Right.
But still being able to wish her well and for the rest of her life.
I think that when you can wish someone well, despite anything that happened, I think you've reached that place of that inner peace and that forgiveness, because we talk about the opposite of love being hate. And I think it's more like an indifference, because when there's indifference, there's no emotion any longer. That is just somebody there who has this name, and I wish them well. That's it.
This season in my life is over, and,
right.
and that's what it is. I love what you said, and I think that sometimes we have to release that, even those emotions of guilt and shame
Right.
for our own.
Right.
Avril, I wanted to ask you how human design can help us in dealing with these situations that can be really hurtful, or if there are aspects of it that we could concentrate perhaps.
Right. And I'd love to share that with you. The human design gives you your blueprint of how you were born. And I like to say we were all born perfectly designed, and then life happened. And that is the conditioning. And so it helps us to see where some things may have happened and how we responded. But what I've come to love almost the best right now in human design are the 64 gates of it, which are based on the ancient I Ching hexagrams. And what I saw as I studied those was that there was a lot of wisdom for living, and a lot of things that are the truisms that we all have heard over time are there in us. They're naturally imprinted in us because we have all of the chart. So every single gate is part of us, just not all of them are defined and easily accessible for us at any given time. And so when there's a gate of self-love, a gate of compassion, there's a gate of friction, there's a gate of shock, there's a gate of wonder and curiosity. So when I looked at these essential themes and I pulled out an essential theme that I thought was a self-development kind of theme, and I put it together. That's why I wrote my book, Journey to Yourself, because in each one, there's a theme and introspection, and then there are some reflection questions to look at. So, for instance, one of the gates, the essential theme for me was be true to yourself. Now, you and I have heard that and said that, I'm sure, many, many times over, but what does that actually mean? To be true to yourself. And so, in looking at and studying that gate, it's so what do I believe in? What do I value? What is important to me, and begin to vocalize those things. I journal about everything. So to write those things down, because now you've become true to yourself. And that may end up helping down the road to setting the boundaries, because there's a gate around intimacy and partnership. And so positive, healthy relationships require honesty, trust, and vulnerability. It's being able to examine them. How is this relationship? Is it based on those things? And if not, is it then a relationship that needs to be tweaked or let go of? So in human design, and particularly in the gates, it's this wisdom, I think, for living, and it's a wisdom for humanity of how we can live in concert with one another in a way that can be in harmony. We go from a very selfish gate like self-love to harmony, which is gate 37, which is in order to have harmony in the world, we've got to have harmony within. So if we don't have that inner peace, how can we help promote and live in outer peace? So for me, that's how human design has become helpful, because it causes introspection. It allows for a personal journey through these to say, okay, this is who I am, this is how I am, and learning how to let people know and how to live in that way. It's a utterly fascinating tool. Everyone who I've read for, and it's simply based on your date and time of birth and your birthplace. So it's the astrology aspect of it. But from there, and the way things were lined up, you've got an energy blueprint that is unique to you. And we get in trouble when we fight our energy blueprint, but we don't know that we're fighting it. So the first step is to know it. And when we know it and we come to understand the wisdom within it, we can begin to make the changes that allow us to live aligned to who we're supposed to be.
That is so fascinating. And with that, I would love to come back on you before we conclude this beautiful conversation and ask you what you are working on. Is the book already out, or what is the plan with that?
It is. So I'll just, here's my cover.
Oh,
It's Journey to Yourself, Unlock the Gates of Human Design and Awaken Your Inner Wisdom. It's available via Amazon, so it is worldwide. I also did write 2 journals to go with it. So I take the reflection questions and the companion journal, and instead of it being, how could you, it changes to how could I? Because if you're going to really do journaling reflection, it's got to be about the I. And the other one is for those who might also use oracle cards, is how to do an oracle reading for each gate. that can give you an examination of your past pattern, your current, and what you need to be aware of moving into the future. And I've just finishing up being able to create, I'm calling it an inspiration deck. It's like an oracle deck, but it's more than affirmations. It's got a quote and it's got some food for thought and a suggestion for today. Today, contemplate about da 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 da. Today, give gratitude for 3 things in your life that bring you joy. Those kinds of things. So those are my latest projects. The book is out and the card deck I'm hoping will be out before the end of this year. It's close. It's now making sure it looks and feels the way I want it to.
Beautiful. So if our listeners would like to get in touch with you or learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
The easiest way is my website, which is my full name. So it's aprilgoffbrown.com. There they would find out, what I'm about, to see if they like what they're reading. Different ways of working with me are on there. They can also download a free chart and mini report on their human design if they're curious, and then schedule with me to learn more with it. And so I think that would be probably the easiest way to do it, is simply the website. The link to the book is there. And I also have a shop that I now am creating t-shirts and sweatshirts and hats and the like that have these motivational messages, and including mugs and stuff. And my big one is, I am perfectly designed. So you wear that and have your tea or your coffee and your mug that says, I am perfectly designed, to remind you every single day. So all of those links are on the website for people to be able to explore and learn more. But that is the fastest and easiest way to find me. Thank you for asking.
As always, we will put all the links in the description of today's episode. April, very final question. If there was one take-home message that you would love everybody to remember from this conversation, what that would be?
That you are perfectly designed, that you're not crazy, you're not any of these negative things. You are perfectly designed and you are worthy of being exactly who you are meant to be. And so go ahead and find her, because she's an amazing being.
That is so beautiful. Well, navigating the emotional terrain of a dysfunctional family can be challenging and deeply painful. However, as we just learned, it is possible to mitigate the impact of these toxic dynamics on our mental health, reclaiming our mental well-being, and break the cycle of dysfunction. We have the power to create a healthier and a more positive future for ourselves, even if it means redefining or distancing perhaps certain family relationships, because we deserve to live a life free from the shadows of past hurts. And with this in mind, I want to leave you with a quote from Melvin Russell Ballard, who said, "Family is not an accident, it's divinely ordained. We can't choose our family, but we can choose how we deal with it." Ever, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, for sharing so much about yourself and what you do, your mission with us. I truly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we would love to know what you think about this topic. Do you have family or close relationships that have been emotional and psychologically taxing? If so, and you are still finding them challenging, I'm pretty sure that you will find this episode very useful and inspiring. But if you need extra help, do check April's website, her work, her books, and follow her on social media. You will find all the links in the description of today's episode. Hopefully not, but if you have been affected in any way by the topic we discussed today, as always, I invite you to seek professional help. Join me next time when we will continue exploring inspiring and challenging situations. Because remember, we are together in this journey. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell and like this video. See you in the next one.